Hello, my name is Rob Wheeldon. I'm an adult dyslexic. I'm here today with Anna Stevens, who has an approach to the dyslexic thinking style. What we're going to look into is some solutions. My favourite quote from John Lennon goes like this: "There are no problems, only solutions." So, let's explore some solutions.
Hello, as Rob's just said, my name is Anna Stevens. I'm a specialist in helping dyslexic thinking people learn how to learn using their way of thinking. And what we find is when they learn in this way, reading, writing and many other activities come more naturally and more easily, and problems start to dissipate.
So Anna, what made you take an interest in dyslexia?
There were several things that came together, as they do sometimes in life. Firstly, it's personal experience. While I consider myself to be mildly on the spectrum of dyslexic thinking, I do experience it nonetheless, and I have had difficulties as a result of it. I also found out that there were ways of overcoming it which were far more developmental and based on ideas to build neural pathways through the mind. And that really connected because I started to see things that I'd never seen before in terms of how to help people and the impact of doing it when you help them in their way.
So this kind of altered perspective, this could help, say, in education or in the workplace?
Once you start to learn and get the hang of it and you get interested in something, learning becomes sort of perpetual. And then whatever you're doing, whether it be learning your work, doing your work, everything starts to become a lot easier.
And I guess it's a more enjoyable process as well.
Well, I would say so.
Yeah.
It's something that's quite easy to do, and it becomes more interesting as opposed to something that you give up because it's just too blinking hard.
Yes, and I think that can be a common problem, can't it, both for children and adults?
Yeah, it is. A lot of people get demotivated, and it's not just dyslexic thinkers. And if you sort of think about anything in your life, if it's hard and you don't get positive feedback, you really don't want to do it. And we do see that a lot with dyslexic thinkers.
So you kind of get into a flow of doing things, and an approach that's making it more accessible to you in a way.
Yeah, very much so.
Anna, one of the things you talk about is not having dyslexia, but having a dyslexic thinking style. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Yes, when I first came into this arena in terms of learning about how to work with it rather than just knowing about it and living with it, it was presented to me very much as if dyslexia is one thing, dyspraxia is something else, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, ADHD. But as I've become more practiced and worked with more and more people, what I've learnt is they're not really separate. They are all part and parcel of the same thing. And I haven't worked yet with somebody who only has characteristics in one group. So I see it very much as a way of thinking because it's anything within this whole sort of 5 or 6 groups.
That's interesting what you say, because they're actually new terms to me. I'd heard of dyslexia before, but the dysgraphia, and there seems to be a whole raft of phrases that I'm unfamiliar with. Would you care to elaborate on what they are?
Okay, very briefly, and using like a purist definition. Dyslexia is problems with words and reading. Dysgraphia is about writing. Dyspraxia is about balance and coordination and movement. Dyscalculia is about maths and manipulation of numbers. And ADD, ADHD, which are attention deficit disorders, are about where one keeps one attention at any one time.
Do these characteristics exist kind of concurrently within individuals? Is that something that you find?
Very much so, all the time. When I'm working with somebody who is having problems writing, for instance, there's always a question about what's behind their not being able to write very well. Is it because they don't have the right sort of pictures in their mind, which in its purest sense would be dyslexia, or is it because they don't have good enough movement within the hand, which would be the fine motor movements associated with dyspraxia.
And these kind of things that don't often get picked up within the school system, do they?
No, a lot of the teaching, and it's understandable because teachers have big groups to teach all at the same time. There's a fair amount of assumption, I think, goes on, that if you show a child to do this, they'll be able to do it. But there are a lot of sub-skills that I don't think necessarily get enough attention.
Yes.
For instance, if something is presented in a line, there seems to be an assumption that a child will look straight across the line from left to right. But if a child doesn't think in a sequential and linear way, that won't necessarily happen automatically.
Yes.
So one of the things I do is to go back and look at each of these little sub-skills and work through it with somebody.
Anna, both in work and in education, I seem to experience some problems, and I'm sure this isn't unique to myself, within things like time management, organisation. I'm terrible at it. Is that something that your approach would address at all?
Yes, in fact, anybody who has problems with like time, recognising how much time has passed, whether they can be on time or late for appointments, and sometimes actually it's hopelessly early for appointments, they don't have an active understanding about how time works, and it's looking then at time as a concept. And this concept links with several others like sequence. And one of the things I regularly do with people, in fact more so with anybody who's got tendencies around ADHD sort of style, is to go through these concepts which build on one another until we have an understanding of time.
Yes, that's one thing I've experienced myself, that sometimes sequentially I will do things in a different order than maybe some of my colleagues would. Now, I was speaking to a friend the other week, and she mentioned to me that she experiences problems with maths and numbers, and this is something she found from schooling as well. Is that something that you would address?
It may well, and sometimes I work with people which almost purely on a maths point of view, and sometimes it threads through from other things. I've already mentioned concepts, and the concepts are critical within a maths environment. And you just said about sequence, you do things in a different sequence.
Yes.
Well, in maths you have to do things in a particular sequence.
Yeah.
So, again, whereas somebody who's got ADHD characteristics, I'd go through these consequences and use sequence and time. It would be similar, applied differently, but very, very similar in a situation where somebody has problems with maths, which then reinforces this picture about how I say they're all linked to one another. Because every programme is individual, and because right at the beginning there are sometimes some issues around people having to settle down. They have to learn to feel comfortable, they have to learn to trust me. So this can take different amounts of time. Generally speaking, we will start to see notable changes, which are not results in themselves, but experience changes at around 10 or 12 hours. So if you were working with me on a block basis and were spending several days with me, then probably around the middle of day 2. And if you were working with me on a weekly basis, as a lot of the children do, on a private tuition basis, then between like second and third month, in order to start seeing real sort of differences, sort of things where you'd be hinting towards results, probably be taking about twice as long as that, and then a bit more time to polish it and to really get the hang of it. So in broad sort of figures, I usually look at around 30 hours.